Giving thanks happens more than once a year in November. No, it happens more than that on a regular basis you go through. 90% of supervisors like this. Like what? Well, they like sitting down, going through and saying thank you. Okay, there's a radio station I was listening to on the way to work one morning called L&K Q&A, kind of a really catchy title as you go through. They claimed on the survey that 90% of all supervisors like this one trait in their employees. Thank you. Not necessarily to the boss. Sometimes you'll hear employees saying thank you to each other. It really creates a nice work environment when people are being appreciated across the board as you go through. One time we sat down there and we talked about dignity and respect, acknowledging people as they go through. I had a faculty member at another college go through, make a comment to me when I was in my role as the vice president of human resources. And he sat there and he says, my students have to earn my respect. I says, I don't agree with you. I give them respect, but sometimes they can lose it in the process they go through if they act inappropriate. He says, well, I don't agree with you. I says, well, that's your problem. Here's a simple truth. My grass is greener than yours. He paused and looked at me. You've never been to my house. You don't know. I says, I'll tell you what, I'll put a 20 on it. Okay, we'll go through and look and see his grass. My grass is greener. They said, do you know why? He says, why? I said, we as a family, we make a point when somebody does something positive for us, we go through and we sit down there and appreciate them. So we lived in the desert, and sometimes in the desert, it gets hot, especially in the summertime. If we have somebody working on our front yard, in our case, we had an HOA, a homeowners association that should go through, they would sit down and part of our overall dues covered front yard maintenance. These people, they owed us nothing, we owed them nothing. But if somebody's out there working on our lawn and it's 100 degrees out, you sit down there, you give them some water. And by the way, if you're baking cookies, give them a cookie too on top of it. Good night, it's no big deal. If you're doing something, sometimes I would even go through, if it's a miserable day and it's 110 degrees, because sometimes it did hit 110 degrees, I sit down, we get a bottle of water, and we sit down there. I go through and take a jar of nuts, put them into a plastic bag, and pass it out to them. And usually there's one guy or two or anything else out there to go through. And so we sit there and do that. And so we started noticing something after a couple of months of this, is that they spent more time and our lawn looked nicer than the neighbors. Now, we're all paying the same fee, except for the fact that they would come by, especially on hot days, and we'd have 3 or 4 workers in our front yard, and it wasn't that much of a yard, but they'd be out there and our grass shined and everything else, and we'd always sit down and make a big to-do. We had greener grass than the whole rest of the entire complex because we paid attention to people's needs, and they were appreciative and everything else. Sometimes we sit down as human beings, we get so busy on our own things, we don't think about being nice and courteous to people around us. I used to work out at LA Fitness. And so there's a custodian, and she would sit down and I would say hi to her every time I came in to work out. Hey, how you doing? And I finally learned her name. Okay, so Eloise, how you doing? And everything else. So she would sit down, and it was interesting that wherever I was working out, she would gradually come over and somehow, and I don't know if it's me or whatever, but the reality is she likes somebody acknowledging that, number one, she exists, and she liked sitting down and having somebody call her by name. It's a big deal. Jason Cork, one of my relatives, he is one of the world's greatest salesmen. Like, oh my gosh, he could sell any materials to anybody on planet Earth because he had this personality. He could sit down and buy a jet ski. He put 3 things on it and also could sell the same jet ski for 20% more than he bought it because it was 3 things. And just the way he said, he taught me the one thing: everybody likes to hear their name. He was a great salesman in many different aspects of it because of the fact he said or paid attention to the simple needs, because of this concept of dignity and respect. If you keep that in mind as part of your overall process in your business communications, it will take you many, many miles further than you ever thought before. Corporate cultures as well as regional cultures, it's a big thing. So what kind of cultural courtesies do you provide each other? What about driving and changing lanes? You ever use sign language? Yes, you know how you use, wait a minute, you don't use all the fingers? You might have a problem over there. Be careful what you do. Be non-judgmental as you go through. Here's the 5 S's of goodwill messages. If you're going to send a goodwill message, be selfless, be specific. I appreciate what you did when you did this. Identify the thing. I really enjoyed that, and that really sat down and made my day. Be sincere, be spontaneous, and keep it short. Don't babble on and on as you go through. Saying thank yous, I'm telling you, one of the most greatest tools out there is a thank you card. Scribble on it. You can do a 1 sentence and sign your name. And sometimes people put those up in my office. I have several of those on my bulletin board in my office. I get enough negative stuff in my life and everything else where I have a student send me a thank you note. I sit down there and I stick it on my poster board and everything else. And every once in a while, I get to look at it in the aspect of it. Somebody said, thanks. That was kind of cool. Okay, so those last a long time. They're short, written on note paper or a card as you go through. Sometimes, if it's really a big deal, you send a formal letter as you go through. And you want to always sit down and build goodwill, because people will always sit down there and remember those moments. Sometimes it's not what you did, it's about how you treated them as you go through. Saying thank you, a good quick note, tell how good the message was in the process you go through. Accept the praise if you receive it, okay? And don't make all kinds of belittling statements about just, oh, I'm not really deserving of that. Yes, you do. Okay, so thank you very much. Can I have a crown for my coronation? No, don't say that, but be gracious about the process. Email is really good. It depends on the level of goodwill, but you can just drop an email sometimes, and you can always sit down and send an email or a phone call or a handwritten message. I just wanted to thank you for, and put it right in there. And handwritten notes are really the most appropriate, and they're impressive because they're a thing, a tangible thing instead of an email. Emails are so quickly forgotten. Thanks happens more than once a year in November. It happens anytime you decide to sit down there and do something memorable in somebody else's mind. Take care.